Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to walk through how to create chains just like this one in Blender using geometry nodes and curves. This method, once it's set up, is pretty easy and intuitive to use, and it allows you to easily manipulate your curve, change its shape, change how it looks on the fly, and if you'll notice here, it will even automatically add and remove links as needed. So if this looks like the sort of thing that you're looking for, keep watching and we'll get started. Okay, before we get the tutorial, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of how to use the assets if you went to my website and downloaded them. We're going to start off, let's say that you have a curve, let's say you have an ordinary Bezier curve here and you want to turn that into a chain. Let's just add a couple of points here, just to make it a little bit more interesting. All right, let's say you want to turn that thing into a chain. And you've gone through and installed the assets from my asset library. Well, what you can then do is come over here to geometry nodes, and we're going to change this to the asset library, asset browser I mean, and then you should have installed the chains under the library heading chains here, or perhaps a different name if you want to store it somewhere else. Then what we're going to do is we're going to click on our curve. We're going to come down here to new, and we are going to drag chain builder down here just to get it in memory. And then once it's in memory, we're going to sort of overwrite that by clicking on there and going to chain builder. And that is going to replace that with the actual contents of the chain builder network. And if you look over here in the modifier tab, it's the one with the wrench, you can see all the parameters that we can adjust. Now, one more thing, we're going to want to have a link that we're going to put on our chain, and this is it right here. It's just a small little chain link. Let's click back on the Bezier curve, and we're going to select the link object to be link. And let's zoom out. There we go, and you can see it's on the chain already. Then you can change the link length to make that the right length, and you can tweak these other parameters too. But there is, in a nutshell, the basic usage of the plugin, or of the assets. All right, let's start by creating a link for our chain. Let's click on the box here, press X to delete it, and press 7 to tab into overhead mode. Press Shift A, let's click on Mesh and then Torus to create a ring we're going to build our link from. Right now it has 48 divisions, that's too much. Let's bump that down to 16. That should be fine. Now we're going to want to cut this and move the right half over. Let's close that. So let's go into edit mode. Press 2. Alt click on that ring to select those edges. Shift Alt to get those ones as well. And now we have that little ring selected. I'm going to press a V to cut, and going to press right click to cancel the move. Now it's still cut, but we just canceled the move part, so the bit that was cut is in exactly the same position at the time we cut it. We're now going to hover our mouse over the geometry, press L to select that cut section. Let's select the move tool and move this a bit to the right until that's about the right size for a link of a chain. All right, now we're going to press Alt and click there to select those edges. Alt Shift click to get, gonna undo that. Alt Shift click to get those as well. Now we're going to want to join these two sections. Going to press Control E and Bridge Edge Loops to create a bridge between those two edge loops. Let's do that again on the other side. Alt click to get those edges. Shift Alt click to get those ones. Control E, Bridge Edge Loops. And let's press Tab to come out of edit mode. Now it's looking a little bit faceted right now. Let's go to Object, Shade Smooth, so that is nice and smooth. And now let's move the pivot point. Right now, if I press R twice, you can see it is rotating around that little orange dot there. That's not where we want the middle to be. Let's keep this selected, right click, and go to Origin to Geometry. And now that little orange dot is right in the geometric center of everything. And if we press R twice again, you can now see that we are rotating around that point. One last thing, let's add a material to this. Let's come over here to our shading tab, zoom in a little bit, and let's create a new shader. Let's click on New and zoom in. And let's make this a little bit metallic. And so this is made of metal after all. And move that up most of the way, and you can see it now has sort of a metallic sheen to it. Let's bump down the roughness so that it's a lot shinier. And that is a good base for our chain link. Now, if you want to, you can throw a texture on there if you want some rust, or get as fancy as you want with the materials. For now, this is a good basic metallic material for our purposes. And let's click on the material and viewport node there so we can see it. All right, there is our link. All right, our link is done. In fact, let's rename that to link. Okay, now we're ready to start working on the curve. Let's pull back and let's add in a curve. Shift A, come down here to curve. Now we can pick any one of these. I'm going to go with Bezier because I think it's a little bit more straightforward. Path is also a good choice, but whichever one of these you think is going to suit your purposes, go with it. Let's click on Bezier. Gonna go to overhead view with a numpad 7. Gonna press G to move this, and S to scale it up. Okay, and let's start putting a chain on this curve. Now, first thing I'm going to do is tab into edit mode, and we have these two Bezier points. We have these two handles here. If we can click on those, we can move those around, can move the points around, and yeah, just ordinary Bezier curve. Let's start to turn this into a chain by going into geometry mode by clicking on the Geometry Nodes tab and click on New to create a new Geometry Nodes object on our curve. Now we're going to want to create copies of this link chain along the curve. So I'm going to press Shift A, come up here to search, going to type in instance and instance on points. What this is going to do, it's going to create a copy of the link on top of all the points in our curve. And we're going to want to add in the geometry of the node into the instance field here. So let's click on link, drag that down here, and we're going to click connect geometry to instance. And you saw it right away, that created some very fat links here. They're scaled up way too much. That's because there is a scale on the Bezier curve. If we come over here into object mode, you can see when we scaled it up, we gave this a very big scale. We're going to want to commit that. So let's come over here to the viewport, press Control A, come down here to rotation and scale. And now that scale has been committed to the curve itself. So it's not influencing the objects anymore. So here are our two links. If we go into edit mode, you can see there's the curve again. And wherever we have a point, we're creating a copy of our link or an instance of our link. If we want to put in a third link, what we could do is select both of the end ones, click in the middle for subdivide. What that just did was subdivide our curve and give us an extra point. And now our instance on points is very dutifully creating an extra instance of this original curve on all three of these points. Now we could keep on going like this and keep subdividing this curve so that we could put more links on those intermediate points, but there's a better way to do this. Let's come back down here to Geometry Nodes, press Shift A, and now we're going to resample our curve. Let's type in resample and click on resample curve, bring that down here. And now what this is going to do, it's automatically going from the start of our curve to the end of our curve and cutting it into 10 pieces. So with 10 dots, we now have 10 places for that link to spawn. And if we click on there and move it around, you can see we get this nice stretchy behavior where those different links are evenly spaced along the chain. Now, the trouble is we don't actually want that. We want these, these are links in a chain. They don't actually stretch. We want these to be at regular lengths, regular spots along the length of the chain. So rather than using a count, we're going to use a length instead. And when you use this setting, what you're going to be doing is choosing how often you want a new link. See, right now we're putting down links every 0.1 meters. That is way too much. Let's pull that down a little bit, put that at 1. And so a lot fewer links, a lot fewer points that curve is being divided into. Let's put that up to 4. Okay, that is too few, but you can click and drag on here to change the number of links on the chain. That is good for now, and you'll notice that because it is putting it down every 1.9 meters, if we move the endpoint around, it's going to automatically add and remove links as the chain is repositioned. And even if we drag the handles. Okay, let's undo that. Okay, one last thing, and this is optional. We're going to realize our geometry. I can't spell. Realize instances. Come down here and put that in between the instance on points and the output. Now, the reason for this is for instance on points, whenever you instance on a point, what that's just doing is it's making something called an instance, which means each one of these copies up here shares the same mesh data with this original node, which is good if you want to, which can be good from a rendering point of view because you're not duplicating that geometry, but sometimes you do want to duplicate that geometry, like if you're going to go on and use this in a physics simulation. In that case, you want to have this realized instances in here, so you're not just telling each one of these clones up here or these instances up here to say, we're going to do exactly the same thing as this one. This one says, not only are you copying it, but this is going to be your own unique geometry. Anyway, if you're just rendering, this doesn't matter and you don't actually need this node. It's not going to do anything. But if you're going on for a physics simulation or something else, this could be important. Anyhow, so there is our very basic bare bones chain. Next thing we're going to do is align these links so that they are pointing in the right direction. Now you might notice that these are all pointing very horizontally, which is not what we want. We want these chain links to be following the direction of the curve. So we are going to do that with the Align to Eulers node. Click on here, go up to search and align Euler to vector. Now we're not going to put that down just yet. Let's give ourselves some more space over here. Because we need to know which direction to go first. We need to know which way these nodes are pointing. If you can almost think of this as a car traveling along a road, which direction is that car traveling? Well, that is called the tangent. So I'm going to go to Shift-A, tangent. And curve tangent it's called here because we're going to be taking the tangent of the curve. And one more thing, we're going to need to capture the attribute. So attribute, capture attribute, and let's put that in the middle here. Now, what is going on with all these weird nodes? So bring that over there. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space so we can see a bit more clearly what's going on. So what the capture attribute does is you can sort of think of it as sort of a spy that's sort of intercepting what's going on. You've got the communications from the resample curve. So at this point, we've just resampled the curve. We've got all those extra points. The geometry goes through here, and here's our spy in the middle. It's going to capture some useful information about that curve and then pass it on. What information is it going to capture? It's going to capture the tangent information. Now, if you look down here, you notice the tangent is a little purple triangle or diamond shape. Purple in Blender means a vector. So what we want to capture from this data stream is a vector. So we're going to click on there. And what the point means is we're going to put this information on each point. So for each point coming through here, figure out what the tangent is. Let's connect the tangent up to the value here. Okay, so for each point coming through, that's what the point is, find out the vector value of the tangent. And what this is going to do, you can think of this as like putting an extra column of data on each point. That is going to be the tangent of the curve as the data flows through it. And we're going to use that to update the rotation. All right. So that's where the align Euler to vector comes in. We are going to come down here, and so this is the captured tangent information. We're going to plug that into vector because that is the direction we want to point in. Let's move these guys down. We are going to connect the rotation to the rotation here because we want to add this rotation to all the points on that curve. And see, after I plugged it in, it got that nice little orientation there. Let's unplug that again, and you can see that went away. Let's plug that back in, and there is our rotation. The tangent, the direction the curve is moving, is now flowing into the rotation of the instance on points. And what these other options mean down here is exactly what is turning to point in the direction of the tangent. So the bottom one is the direction we're pointing, that's the vector. The pivot means how this is going to turn, how it's going to turn. It allows you basically to set the axis. If this is on auto, it's going to just move to the most efficient position possible. If you go on X, that means you're going to restrict it. The rotation is going to be restricted to the X-axis. Y, you're going to restrict your rotation to the Y-axis. Z, you're going to restrict your rotation to the Z-axis. For what we're doing, this is free-flowing, so auto is fine. This just lets us turn around any axis that Blender decides is relevant. And these buttons up top here, this determines what is being turned to point in that direction. So because this is X, that means the X value of our original link is now pointing in the direction of the tangent. If that was Y, then the Y-axis would be pointing in that direction. And if that was Z, the Z-axis would be pointing in that direction. X is just what we want. We designed our link so that is pointing, it is lying more or less along the X-axis. So this is exactly what we want. The next thing we're going to want to do is have these chain links alternate so that one is flat and then one is upright and then one is flat and one is upright. Or in other words, we want to rotate these links 90 degrees every time we take a step along the chain. Well, in order to do that, we're going to need another capture node attribute. I'm going to come over here and go to attribute, capture attribute. Let's put that spy in the middle of the flow here so it is now capturing another valuable piece of information. This time we're going to capture, no, not point, we're going to capture integer information, specifically the index of the point. All right, and let's come over here and Shift A, click on that, index. Okay, so now as the geometry passes through our second spy here, it's going to capture index values. In fact, let's make this a little bit easier to remember. Let's press N to open up the side panel here, and let's just rename that to index so we remember what it is. And the name is what is going to appear if you look at the nodes. So if you're trying to debug one of these and you hover your mouse over top of one of those attributes there, that is going to tell you where the data is coming from, or at least will give you a hint. And if you start giving names to these things, the name is going to come up there. So it might be easier to show you with this this one over here. Let's rename this to tangent. Actually, before we name that to tangent, if we come over here and if we are trying to debug this and we hold the mouse over top of the vector here, the little pop-up says it comes attribute from capture attribute node, which is not terribly helpful. If we change that name to tangent, and we hold our mouse over there, it now says attribute from tangent node, which is a little bit more easier to understand than what we had before, because now we know the name that this came from. And larger networks, this can really help you figure out what's going on. And if you change the label, that will change the name at the top. Change that back to index. Sorry, that's just an aside, and it's useful to rename these nodes, these capture attribute nodes, just because it makes debugging these things so much easier, because once you put names on your data, it becomes easier to understand what's going on. Okay, tangent aside, well, another form of tangent, we want to use this index information we just captured to turn our rings. So we're going to come down here and add in a math node. Bring that down there, and we're going to take the index data we just captured and plug that into our math node. And we're going to turn that into multiply. And now, because we want to turn this 90 degrees every single time we take a step along the chain, we're going to type in, well, we want to turn this by 90 degrees for every step. Now, you might at first think that you want to type in the number 90 for 90 degrees, but node networks use radians instead. So if you remember back to math class, 90 degrees is equal to pi divided by 2 radians. So let's get rid of that 90. Let's type in the word pi in lowercase, divided by 2. And Blender handles mathematical expressions, so pi divided by 2, when you press enter, is going to evaluate to exactly, well, whatever pi divided by 2 is, 1.571. Now we're going to want to pump that into a combine operator. Let's give ourselves a little bit more room here. And sorry for the snapping here. Whenever I'm recording a video, Blender's node network does not play friendly with it, and I get this weird jumping around. Anyhow, I'm going to press Shift A. We're going to type in XYZ and come down here to combine. What this does is it turns a bunch of float values into a vector. Come on. I'm going to use the mouse. Okay, there we go. So what we want to do is rotate this around the x-axis. Remember, with our Euler, we have these links pointing along the x-axis, so we want to rotate around that axis. So the value coming out is going to go into the x there, and then we're going to take that and put it into rotation. And what that is doing, if we look through the flow of our network, so as the points come through on their way to the final geometry, we are capturing the index, we are multiplying it by pi divided over 2, the index times pi divided over 2, and then rotating that and pumping that rotation into the aligned to Euler vector. And that is giving us our 90-degree rotation as we go along the chain. And if we move those nodes around, you can see as we move them, the chain will grow and shrink to accommodate that. Okay, we're almost done. At this point, we have the basic chain in place. Let's add in a few more things to make this a little bit nicer to work with. All right, let's start by cleaning things up. What we're going to do is we're going to use the group input node to organize some of the parameters for our geometry nodes object here. Let's click over here on the modifier tab. And right now, if you want to tweak anything in here, you're going to have to come to the geometry nodes, look at this big node network here, and try to figure out which one of these parameters it is you want to change. And even if you know what's going on, that's not always the easiest thing to do. So what we're going to do is use the group input to pull out the most important ones so that they're easy for the user to change. For example, we might want to change the length that each chain link is put down on. So let's bring length over here to group input. And now, once I made that connection, you can see that length appears over here in the geometry nodes. So rather than having to change it directly on the resample curve node over here, we can just tweak it in the modifier tab here fairly easily. Put that back to 1.9. Or if, for example, you wanted to change what the link object was, we can take the object connection here, bring that over here to group input, and now it's appearing in the modifier tab as well. So if we want to swap that link out for something else, let's go back to object mode. Let's add in a monkey, click back on our node network. And so if we switch from link to Suzanne, we now have that monkey congoing down our little line here. Let's put that back to the link. Thank you, Suzanne. And yeah, this is just a good place to organize a whole bunch of tweakables. One more thing we might want to change is the scale. We can do that by connecting the scale of our instance points all the way over here onto the group input. Although if you do it like that, you're going to see we have a full vector here, which is probably not what we want. We don't want to change each one of these three things independently. We want to do them all at once. So let's disconnect that and click on the group input and click on the group tab over here. And we're going to just add in our custom input. So let's start by getting rid of the scale. We don't want that. And let's click on type float because we want to create a new float field. Now click on plus, and there is our new field in the group input over here. I'm going to change that name to scale and set its default value to 1. And we're going to connect the scale over here to instance on points. And notice that this was set to 0. Let's put that to 1. And now, if we scale that up and down, that will apply a scale to our chain link. Let's put that back to 1. And yeah, we're going to do this with a few more properties, just so rather than having to reprogram the network each time you want to change something, all you have to do is change one of these input properties. One last thing we're going to do is add some randomness to this chain. Right now we have this set up so that every step it takes, the chain flips by 90 degrees, which is a little bit too regular. Let's add a little bit of jitter into there so it looks a little bit more realistic. And we're going to start doing that by adding a random node. Search for random, bring down random value, and we're going to want to go from -1 to 1. So we rotate both left and right around the x-axis. Now let's bring in a multiply node. That's under math. Type in math. Oops, that's not where we want that. One more time. Bring that down here. You have to be careful. Sometimes it will add in links where you don't want them if you put one of these nodes down in the wrong place. Let's change that to multiply. So now our random value is going to be multiplied, but we want it to be multiplied by a factor that the user can determine. So let's connect this to the group input, and let's change the value to, let's rename that to random rotation. And this is just going to be multiplied by the random factor that is coming in to give a little bit of jitter to each one of those links. Finally, we're going to add that to the value coming through here. This is the 90-degree turn every step. Let's add in another math node. Put that between those guys. And now let's add in the random value. And you can see right away that gave us a little bit of randomness. And if we come over here to the random rotation, we can adjust how much of that random factor we're putting in there. And let's put that at 0.2. That should give us a little bit, well, maybe a little bit more. There, and that gives us a little bit of change in the way our chain is finding its way down that curve line. And there is our chain done. Let's come back over here into the layout viewport, and we can change this chain around by tweaking it and moving its underlying curve. Let's tab into edit mode so we can adjust the curve. Let's get the tweak tool there. And if we move the points of our Bezier curve around, the chain will automatically adapt to follow it, add in new links as necessary. You can move the handles as well too. If you want to add in an extra point, you can do that by selecting any 2 points, right-clicking, and go to subdivide. And there you have a new point that you can play around with. And this is a quick and easy way to create whatever chain you want, wherever you want, and give it whatever shape you want. So I hope you found this useful. As I said before, I'm going to be putting this up on my Blender Market page and the Gumroad and GitHub as well. So that is where you can download a pre-made version of this if you don't want to bother with the whole tutorial. And if you found this useful, please like and subscribe this, and consider supporting the channel because that really helps me out and helps me make more videos. All right, thanks for watching.